All right, welcome everybody.
Wow.
Full house, amazing. I'm Nick Simchick. I'm the chair of history and theory here at the AA, and I'm delighted, so excited for this talk today and to kick off with the first public lecture of 2025-2026 AA public program with the theme world building. I think it's very apt that we're starting with a talk about the future of the past. So we start with firm footing as we move over the course of a wonderful program all the way into science fiction. So I think hopefully you find the continuity between the two. So today, very honored to present to you Alex Martínez Suárez, who's a Dominican architect, researcher, and curator. He holds an advanced master's in architecture from the Berlage Institute and a graduate degree in museum studies from Harvard. He's the director of Archipelago, a multidisciplinary platform dedicated to architecture, academic research, and cultural production. Alex has taught at Harvard, at the Instituto Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico, and currently serves as professor at the Universidad Iberoamericana in the Dominican Republic. He's an active member of Docomomo Dominican Republic and a member of the editorial board of Arquitecto, a Santo Domingo-based architectural magazine. His work on modern architecture includes co-editing Architecture in the Path of the Sun, Understanding Dominican Modernity, and co-authoring a book and exhibition called Jaragua Won't Crumble, which I very much enjoyed reading over the past week. He's recently been honored with 2 awards at the 12th Dominican Republic Architecture and Urbanism Biennale. So today's talk comes out of a lot of lunches I've been having with our own Carlos Lora Yunan, where we've been sort of brainstorming about what really matters somehow today. And sure enough, he suggested that you come and speak. And it's evidence, I think, of how immediately our public program can allow ideas to come together. And I hope you'll see that today you feel like the right person at the right time in the right place. And there's a lot of things happening at the AA that somehow automatically make sense, I think, already just from our chats with what you're about to say. Our legacy of the School of Tropical Architecture, which is being digitized in our archive, which I believe your uncle was a part of. Your links to many of the people who've taught here through the Berlage, as well as our new MA in conservation and reuse, so, as well as the question of world building. So how is the future intrinsically linked to reimagining the past? So right person, right place, right time. We're very honored to have you.
Thank you.
And look forward to your talk.
Well, the honor is mine. Good evening, everyone. Everyone, thank you for being here. I would like to express, first of all, my gratitude to the Architectural Association, School of Architecture, all the staff, Ingrid Shorter, the director, Carlos Lora, and Nick, thank you for making this possible. And also Dominican Embassy in London, Ambassador Rosa Grullón, Hernández Grullón, Ligia Reed, and finally Centro León and Maria Amalia León for their support and generosity. Thank you all for making this encounter possible tonight. What we're gonna start by saying that this is more of a informal talk, let's say, to tour you around on some issues that I believe that are extremely important and that they've been a little bit, let's say, invisible in the world, in the global discourse on 20th century heritage. And I think this is extremely important because especially in this context in London, in the AA, where we are extremely. I felt so warm here, and they are so open to have this discussion. In where normally we don't have this, or we don't take these topics so often. So I'm really grateful, and so this is. I want to say that in the Caribbean during the 20th century, architecture was never neutral. There was always entangled with politics and climate and culture. And we're going to talk about a little bit of this this evening. So this is, the Caribbean is often looked as a political archipelago, a region marked by colonial legacies or kind of a constant presence, for example, of powers coming from abroad, of course. And for example, this is I really feel that this is an important moment to talk about this critical arena where we need to understand a little bit the atmosphere, and not as a peripheral phenomenon in global discourse. And again, you have to kind of understand this political archipelago context in order to then place Caribbean modernism, who are now many of these important buildings are and threatened by demolition or ruins, and so we have to ask ourselves as scholars and practitioners or citizens that how important is to document and protect and rethink this legacy within the global conversations coming from such a special place in the world. And I have to say that my time living in Europe really changed my way of thinking, that I have to definitely, when I came back, I said, definitely I have to make a stand on, I need to either swim or fly to get our valuable things here, and our surroundings and things that are really important for us. They should be also being discussed in places like this. So this is definitely important for my professional and academic career, to have this little moment to discuss with you. So is there a kind of paradox in the Antilles, in the Caribbean region, that so we are so close to each other, but there's so many people involved and powers outside historically from this colonial past, from this, and specifically when we talk about the 20th century, we have here important presence, for example, of the U.S. In our country, specifically, or in Dominican Republic, Haiti, or Puerto Rico, and this is going to also be seen, or this important kind of lens. Through our architectures also, it's going to respond. And for example, these American ties you will then see that infrastructurally these countries really were thought and by Americans at the beginning of the 20th century. Also, they had some power to kind of organize a little bit these islands, or kind of they tried. So this is how you might look at architecture in the beginning or at the end, or at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. This was kind of the atmosphere in the old cities like Havana, and this is later on in Santo Domingo, but then in the capital of Puerto Rico, where you will see that they have reminiscence of neo classical architecture or expression. So again, this is gingerbread houses, vernacular architecture in Port-au-Prince, or syncretic architecture. So it is important to understand that how did modernity arrive to this context. It was imported, of course, by a group of architects that either they studied abroad, or they were themselves were European, flying to this, not flying, but actually in a boat. They were coming back to their islands, and you can kind of map here a group of people that they were. Henry Klum in Puerto Rico, he worked with Frank Lloyd Wright. Richard Neutra was coming in this time to this area to try to get some work. He was working in Puerto Rico as well, and you have the Dominicans who studied in Europe or the United States, and they were somehow entangled there with the avant-garde. So there is no linear process like to go from eclecticism and modernism in the Caribbean. But there is an important adaptation of the climate and kind of vernacular dialogues from, and you could see in this kind of parallelism that you, of course, would be shifted in time, but there are extremely interesting examples on how the important here was adapting an international style that now we have to face all of these challenges. And now we were talking about ventilation, cross ventilations, brise soleil, louvers, in a different kind of way because of the necessities of surviving the heat, humidity, or even the hurricanes. So these are examples that I find very interesting because you might think, well, where are these architects? Well, these two brothers from Santo Domingo, they studied in very close to the Netherlands. They were studying in Belgium. So I guess that all of these modernists, they had in their hands the MoMA catalog from the 30s, and they are just trying to kind of adapt these ideas, and they knew how to do it in their context, but they were also neoclassical architects. They knew how to do like classical architecture, and so we have to come with, again, kind of seeing how are these dialogues going from the different examples from masters or well-known architects in practicing outside or internationally, and then you find very interesting approaches by these architects that try to kind of grasp these ideas and place them. This, for example, why José Antonio Caro Álvarez Santo Domingo is one of the best architecture done in the Caribbean, yet it's not so well known, and it's in almost perfect, well preserved, and it's still the medicine faculty in Santo Domingo. So I think that it's all of these situations are given because of a political intent. There is always a political hand behind this challenges of these architects because of the moment. And I will go like kind of now one by one, making a kind of tour on the islands. We're going to do a kind of island hopping just very quickly to kind of just you to see what kind of architecture was done there and who are the people behind this political condition as well. But I want to show this image because I found it very, very suggestive how in 1950 in a beach in the Dominican Republic called Boca Chica, 30 minutes from the capital, this great modernist who worked in Yale decided to place the pilotis from Le Corbusier's ideas, place them inside the Caribbean Sea. This is something that really still blows my mind. Like, you know what? We're gonna do it, the building on top of the sea, and this is really was iconic building. Speaking of hotels, modern hotels, and we're gonna talk later on Jaragua Hotel, who was previous. He was from the same architect, but it was from 1942. But then in also in the 50s, beautifully done work of how to ventilate naturally these buildings. This is the work of Henry Plum in Puerto Rico, in Rio Piedras, in San Juan. And I want just to argue again that these buildings were never neutral. They were responding to political conditions, and they are, and we're gonna see here through this little island hop, these case studies very, very quickly, otherwise we won't finish. And we're gonna start with Cuba, and it's important to understand that these people, these presidents here, when, for example, Carlos Prios, Socarrás government, the gambling business was allowed in Havana. So this kind of changed the paradigm here. And the dictatorship, Fulgencio Batista, opened up the public for a nightlife and rising casino luxurious lifestyle, who brought a lot of money from the United States. And but then you start to see how these vernacular kind of modern examples starts to appear in the 40s, in beautifully done by a group of architects that they were decided to change the face of their cities. And in Cuba's case, it's impressively to know that Walter Gropius actually went there in 1949, and he was the only, main figure. Jose Luis said also was working in Cuba but briefly came there, and you would find very interesting examples here of building very well thought, trying to adapt to the and of course the Tropicana, and things are gonna get really heavy here when these casinos, when these these are public buildings. I have to say that Richard Neutra finally got some work here in Cuba. He was from the 40s. He was kind of wandering around to try to get some projects here. Mies van der Rohe never came, but he thought that this would work in the Caribbean. This would have been interesting to discuss this. But then Fulgencio Batista, just before the revolution, he was really, as I said, got really intense for the casinos and making with mafia agents, and of course then in 1959, you would imagine what happened to Fidel Castro. And then he went to Santo Domingo, where he was received by Trujillo. This is in Hotel Jaragua, where he stayed. Of course, they were protecting themselves. And then the revolutions, turning golf courses into national art schools, extremely interesting cases, and in a kind of failure way. Then later, the revolutions forgot about these buildings. And I'm just going to go quickly into Dominican Republic. For example, you have to understand we have also a important political figure, which is Trujillo, Rafael Trujillo, who he ruled 30 years, and he used this idea of modernity and from progress, but also with the modernist architecture as a flag for some type of buildings. And we say that on 1930 we had like two kind of tsunamis coming, one or two political important situations happening here. We had the Hurricane San Zenón, who destroyed completely Santo Domingo's, and also 1 month later Trujillo came into power. So it was a perfect storm to change the legislation on the new Santo Domingo will be built with concrete. So this opened up a new opportunity for us. But then there's some strange contrast by Trujillo's megalomaniac idea of power. He wants to represent the power and the national palace, in a language that really represents power, or more fascist, whatever, and then use the idea of the modern to all for the infrastructure, and this is happening as well in other islands. You will see later. Then some important buildings were started to appear in 1942. We have the crown and most important building maybe in our context, Hotel Jaragua, that we come back. And Hotel Jaragua received a very important guest who was Richard Neutra himself in 1945, who came here and gave a lecture, and he said, and I quote him, he says that that Hotel Jaragua and the buildings from the university campus were as good as the best in Europe. And so this is very important for this region, because this guy was touring around, making some PR, I guess, and he was already working for the government of Puerto Rico. So he stayed in this, and this is important kind of endorsement for the architecture done here. And I have to say that this is still very early. These projects are very early. Like normally you would see that the climax in the Caribbean would be the end of the 50s. And talking about something around the 40s or before, it's still considered very, very, very early. So this is also in Santo Domingo, and of course the highest point might be in 1955, where Trujillo himself wanted to celebrate a world fair. And he did a whole new master plan of a city and now this is still works as an important civic center where the Senate is a very important and symbolic place in Santo Domingo. In 1961, he was killed. Otherwise, he would stay forever there. And we have. There's a lot more to say what happened in Santo Domingo, but we have important jewels like this brutalist temple that it's been very, very well preserved by a group of people that really care about this, and this is really very important to say, because this is a unique place in the Caribbean that also has been invisible in the global discourse, and this is one of the reasons why I'm here. So in Puerto Rico, it's mainly these three figures that all three of them shared in their time. A Time magazine cover. I would say you can imagine that they're some kind of influencers back then. Rexford Tugwell. American governor in the 40s, Luis Muñoz Marin it was a perfect storm again, where these guys, Tugwell brought Richard Neutra to work as a consultant in a committee to design public works and this was when they already started to talk about modernism in Puerto Rico, and Richard Neutra really tried to make important prototypes in here, and these drawings are really interesting. And we have to talk about maybe the transparency. How are these working with louvers or not? But I have to say that also the work of Henry Klum is, as I mentioned before, is very important. He came from the school of Taliesin from working with Frank Lloyd Wright, and he was really mainly very heavy, and he stayed in Puerto Rico, and he worked one of the main figures there. In Caribe Hilton, from Toro, Ferrer, y Torregrosa in San Juan, really changed the chip for hotels in worldwide. Actually, Hilton later on, after this very early modern project, they started to work on the towers. This is very interesting. But what is not, this is very well known building. What is not said is that Hotel Jaragua in Santo Domingo is prior to this one. and we'll come back to that. Again, this is Klum. This is Klum trying to adapt his projects, and this is again this. No, this is a Concha Hotel in San Juan. Luis Muñoz Marin also projected or pushed this international airport, who was very celebrated. And in Haiti, it's one of these invisible cases that you wouldn't imagine that they had something interesting there. That is, of course, it's completely forgotten, and it is interesting to come back to this conversation later on how the President Estime projected in 49 and 1950 on an exposition prior to Trujillo's one, and there are very interesting buildings designed by Alberto Mangonés, who then became an important figure on heritage in the region, and I have to say that Haiti, it's going to a very, very difficult moment, but this is not new. It's back then also they've been from this president had a coup d'etat, and it was a dictatorship as well for many years, and well, the rest is history. But keeping on in talking about these buildings, the work here in Jamaica, I want to remark the work of Wilson Chung, who really it's a triumph of a national identity with this kind of modern buildings like the National Stadium. But then you would think that the little islands, the Lesser Antilles, were not, you wouldn't find anything there. But you actually would find even the very, very early French architects came to these islands in Guadeloupe and Martinique, and very early they brought this modern problem here and adapt them very well, and we have very interesting and examples here. And you would really, in this context that still are very small, very, very small city centers and communities, you would find these very well kept and sometimes not so well kept examples. But also in the Dutch Antilles, there, of course, you have then the Dutch hand coming straight from the Netherlands with avant-garde experience prior to coming to the Caribbean. So they knew what they were doing. And can you imagine that Gerrit Rietveld also did a project here? Very interesting how he rethought on, we need an open space, we need shadow, we need to protect ourselves from the sun. So I have to say that this is one of my favorite lessons in that still it's very valid to kind of revisit this. And finally, Aruba, with Maurice Lapidus, a famous architect in Miami, doing a lot of important mainstream hotels, modern hotel, arrived here and kind of launched the idea of also having the piña colada in a paradise that later would be kind of one of these postcards throughout all of the world. Trinidad is a special here case because it's also became Colin Lair's legacy here in Port of Spain. Very, very interesting and well kept and transformed. They have really understand that what is important to preserve this and this legacy, and they have really make an effort to kind of to maintain this properly, and you would find here the work of also of Anthony Lewis, who are very well designed modernist and regional examples here. So many of these buildings, they really became important for our identity, are the representation of how we feel part of a modern society, and yet they are, what is sadly happening is that many of these buildings are not in the present. They haven't been understood as buildings that should be taken into account as part of valuable or heritage, or being part of this conversation, because mainly we think that colonial architecture, 16th century architecture, is the one that we should preserve. So this opens up, and this is Hotel Jaragua in 1985. That was, unfortunately, it was demolished by the same government who built it 33 years before. But there are cases, like in 1998, a group of people really stopped, and architects really stopped the demolitions. They didn't want to do this Hotel La Concha, which is a beautiful, very, very good architectural, contemporary architectural renovation in Puerto Rico. They had to fight against the system to try not to they don't tear it down. And there is we have done, I would say, we as a group of people that are trying to make these projects visible in our region. There has been very important efforts has been done, trying to do this together in this very difficult and complex island and insular situation, that you might think that it's easy to go from one island to the other in the Caribbean, but that's actually not true. That it is very difficult, and you can't. So maybe you want to have a nice vacation, want to go to the Caribbean, and maybe I'll take a tour, and maybe you can do that if you get into a cruise, but it's very difficult to. We are all together in this same blue thing, which is the sea. It's bringing us together, and it's again tearing us apart. And we all have such a complicated past as well. So we have a lot of challenges, and I have to say that these spaces are important to show this, that we also matter, because whenever you, for example, there's great opportunities that you might think that the Caribbean is gonna have an important place here, and at the end, only Havana had in this show, and I've been critical to my friend Barry Bergdahl, was one of the main curators, and I was there with him, and I used to say, like, what a pity. I emailed you last year a book we did on Dominican modernity, and again we were almost invisible here as well. And I want to, just for the last 10 minutes, I want to we're good on time. I want to share with you a little bit on what am I doing from my own practice, and how I'm trying to address this challenges we have. I've been involved since very young into Docomomo study and trying to campaign really and publish and exhibit about and reflecting about the importance of these buildings. We did this book for the 2014 Venice Biennale, and it was the first time the Dominican Republic got this invitation, and put us there in the map, and we were actually presenting this there. And I have been part of many projects on bringing these topics to the table from critical practice, but also with my students, making them understand that it is important to also to leave a mark and really these documentation projects that are now available online, and they are very well received by especially students abroad, that they want to search something about this architecture that doesn't exist in many books, and it's very hard to find in the internet though. And we have done exercises like redrawing modern buildings that they don't even exist anymore. And we have made publications, and we have made important, I would say, brainwashing activities on that I plan to kind of get the chip on them to really understand that this could be a very interesting way to how can you leave society with something that is worth talking about. I don't know what happened here. But again, this is something that the collection that I did last year and in one the Biennale. It's a collection of all these, some of these projects done. But I finally want to talk 5 minutes about this project, which is going to be the assignment for all of you to later on. You have homework. With this project, I want to show you the trailer before we have a little chat here. Jaragua no Cae is a project on a building, the life and death and everything around this building, Hotel Jaragua. But just to let you know, it's like this is in Puerto Rico. And in the beginning of the 20th century, and this is in Cuba. This is the national hotels, let's say, the image of the hotel at the beginning of the 20th century. In Santo Domingo, we were still inside a walled city for 400 years. So we didn't know, we haven't met the Caribbean Sea, which we were there, and this young architects graduating from Yale, Guillermo Gonzalez, came and had the opportunity to work for the regime, and also start to make a series of projects, and came up with this beautiful example of the Jaragua Hotel, a very simple, it didn't have air conditioning whatsoever, but it was very well thought building. And for the first time, the city of Santo Domingo was thinking of having a modern backdrop facing the sea, and it was really a national. It's a building with so many layers here, and this is Trujillo in the middle of his hotel, and you might think that. Here, maybe with this image, you would see that maybe some Alvar Aalto references here arrived in the Caribbean, and these beautiful scenes and very well done scale on how these places could be really leisure, could take another form in a society that has never experienced having fun just across the Caribbean Sea. This project was widely internationally published, which is, it seems like it's interesting that Guillermo Gonzalez, it seems like he had some connections, I guess, and of course through the advertising. And what we did in this project, we tried to understand how this building really grew up from the hand of the same architect, how mainly in the 50s, also because of this megalomania idea of more space, more rooms, and this at the end is going to bring a lot of problems to the hotel itself. This is the hotel in 1960, and this is also we did this as a matter of justice. All of these hotels that came after the Jaragua Hotel, they were really big. They were really the postcards that they were everywhere, and the piña colada, and the palm tree, and the bikinis, and people wanted to come here, but very little is being talked about this example, the Jaragua Hotel, who later on even past survived a war. These are American forces when in 1965 again they invaded for the second time in the 20th century our country and left the hotel and the government with very bad management and issues, and at the end the discussion of they are gonna demolish the building, and they really it was a big discussion that it ended up unfortunately by the same government tore down. It was a big show on really very very difficult moment of society. Really, a lot of people were empowered by. We should save this building. It's a place of memory in our identity. It's a very complex story, and there's a lot of gossip, and there are villains. There are a lot of people, characters in this story. I have to say that this ended up as a book, and a book thought not only for architects. This book, actually, I have to say, it's here in this library. Also, Ingrid has one in her own house, in her own hands. Rab Messina, who is my colleague, and coming from another perspective, she saw all this work and with the research. She said this is a story that has to be told in a different way, not as such academic way. This is touching on a lot of people from all of the society. So how about we do it with a different narrative? So you will see it's a story. Somebody's telling you a story on this icon, and the homework is you have to go into this incredible archive we did, and we expanded the book in a never-ending scrolling down. And you will hear live music from the hotel. You will get to know like everything a lot of things that happened in this story, and this is the homework here. You can download the book. You can download the book here, and this is the QR. I hope it works. I have to say that I'm on time, I think.
Yes, thank you.
And I don't know how to thank you.
Well, no, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you for your story.
We did a kind of little tour to kind of put you in context for this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, I could talk to you for like 6 hours about this. Like, there's so much I want to know, and there's so many ways we could go here, and I want to make sure we all have time to sort of chit-chat and that this becomes a kind of seed for more. But like civilian cap on and not professor, the first thing is how beautiful these projects are, right? It's like it's a word that somehow we're reluctant to use in architecture schools, and obviously is like one of the main motivators for why most people, civilians, sort of enjoy, and how like within a very tight set of parameters that is kind of the vernacular or the kind of modernist tradition, there's so much sort of effort to bring joy, right? There's a kind of extremely obviously complicated history, a lot of change, a lot of different things are happening, and yet there's a kind of consistency in that change, which is a kind of lightness, like a lightness of spirit and a kind of joy. So that's like my most sort of civilian interpretation. And then when I start thinking of it more as like an academic, if you'll bear with me, a quote that kept on coming up for me in your presentation is from one of my favorite novelists. So it's Tomasi di Lampedusa's The Leper. And he's also writing about an island. This is where I'm from in Italy, in Sicily, going through a huge amount of change, political change. And he says that for things to stay the same, everything must change. There's this kind of contradiction that for continuity of culture, there also has to be an adaptation of culture. And looking at your work, and in particular, and I will highly recommend the website for the Jaragua. So rather than the PDF, or is it that goes to the PDF, the website?
You're trying to sell it, yes.
The website is this incredible...
It's a free book, you just have to download it, that's it.
I mean, no, because I know there's also a lot of students from conservation and reuse here. The website is an incredible way of telling a story of a building. And it gives this kind of 80-year history of this hotel through all the incredible cultural influence it's had. So like some of the most well-known Caribbean classics, merengue and boleros, are coming out of this hotel. Some are named after this hotel, right? La Luna sobre Jaragua, right? Alberti.
Luna sobre Jaragua, exactly.
Alberti. It's like imagine having a song written about your building as an architect. It's like the greatest
the song
compliment.
The song became, also like a national bolero.
So I mean, they become these kind of supercharged cultural transmitters that are able to navigate huge political change and still remain relevant and adapt and find new roles, always through experiences of joy somehow. Musicality is a central part of it. And this website, should we call it a website? It's like a digital museum of all the mediatic and cultural life that is attaching itself to these buildings. And that somehow is maintained alive through huge political change. These buildings show you, I think, this kind of for things to stay the same, everything must change. In the way that music evolves, but we all know that that's somehow Dominican music, somehow. And so there's like a million questions, and I want everyone to be able to talk and ask questions. But three things, if I have to ask you, the main sort of things are, what it feels like this huge, incredible history is it's just shocking that this is like omitted from what we teach and know. It's shocking, right? Especially in London, which is, in some ways, one could imagine it as a Caribbean city, right? There's so much Caribbean life in this city. There's so much connection to the Caribbean.
It is.
So, why do you think that is? That's my first question.
This is very hard because we say like, how come? It's I guess it's more interesting to talk about the sexiness of this place for tourism rather than what maybe interesting content inner land or so we pass by the idea of this hedonistic place where we all want to be there, with a drink. So I guess it's there are many other modern architects and projects that seems like to be more interesting for scholars that they're looking at other places globally. And this is happening in the Caribbean in all islands, I would say, and we are trying to. But maybe for example, I have to say that Cuba is very well documented. There's a lot of people that has and really want to work with Cuba. Cuba has a lot also, referring to the islands. So maybe you have Cuba, and you will find more books on Cuba, but still. There's so much to do. There's so much, so many bridges to build in so many places. And it's not that we are so far from and also Britain has their own agendas there in the Caribbean. But then you don't know what's going on there besides if there's an earthquake or a climate situation or a hurricane or But so this is something that you have to reflect on.
So we're starting today, at least.
Maybe, this is a great.
Did the Caribbean modernists see themselves as a movement? Did they see themselves as part of a bigger project? Did the Dominican modernists see themselves?
I'm not sure. It was not ideological. It was not. They were trying to do. They knew, first of all, these people knew how to do architecture, and you would go to them. And they were doing private commissions. So and they were also doing neoclassical or neo Spanish. Which was very in fashion for the high society to ask for a beautiful house in this style, and they could do that. They could really pull off beautiful projects in different styles. So they had a very versatile response in their practice. So again, but they knew how to do it, and this is incredible because any of these guys were educated as a modern. There was like which modern school besides the Bauhaus that is not the case, and they were just as the assimilation of these. They came through publications and maybe I saw something in the avant-garde magazine. I don't know. But of course they were in the momentum and they were open to kind of explore and try to do it in their own way in a very different context where this was thought maybe.
Yeah, and some buildings really stood out for me personally, and I have to wonder, and something that the Jaragua Hotel website does, is it shows a bit of the evolution of the use, a bit of the decay, a bit of the language around how you end up destroying something even if it's so important to people, how that happens and why. But the ones that are standing, is the Gonzalez Pelotti
it's standing, but it's been a lot. It's not like that anymore. It's again these buildings, if they have been also hugely intervened and changed completely. Other are in completely decay or other. So we're still struggling to understand that they are important. They could be considered as heritage. We are in this discussion. In Europe, this discussion passed a long time ago. Of course, you guys have challenges here, but this challenge that society needs to understand that these buildings might be interesting, and they do have the opportunity to have a second life.
Can you walk us through what's going on in some of these buildings today? Right. My personal favorite is the Copello building.
The Copello building.
The Copello building from just the ones you've shown me.
Copello, for example.
I love it. And then also the
what
hotel.
happened to this Copello building is that
what's going on in there? How is everyday life using it, appreciating it?
Unfortunately, like 2 years ago, such an important building from 1938, the owner decided to bring down the glass blocks, bespoke from 1930s. And authorities didn't realize what's going to happen. And when they were all out. They said, "Oh, we have to stop this." So now it's completely like the staircase, this beautiful stairway. It's unprotected because things like this happen. Like the owner or the developer, there comes a developer and they says, "You know what? Let's just turn this." So it's insane, and we have a lot of challenges. Also, because we don't have a powerful tool like legislation, like heritage law to protect these buildings. Not only these buildings, but also heritage, like national heritage, patrimonio. But
maybe Dominican can lead the way, right? So this is the $1 million question: is how does one protect without freezing?
Yeah.
Without a building becoming taxidermy? Like, how do you keep a building alive? Meaning changing in order to stay the same.
It's a very difficult. I don't even know. How do we pretend that our kids and other generations would know about these buildings because almost everything is getting destroyed, and this is a situation happening in a lot of islands as well. But I have to say that I want to just we have a few minutes.
Yeah.
I want to get some
Yes, absolutely.
questions. You definitely.
No, I would
You
just
said it
continue
was
forever. You're
only
absolutely right. Yeah.
And
Yeah, please.
if you have any comment, any question.
Yeah, please.
And of course, we're gonna have a little time to. If somebody wants to raise their hand. We have here.
So you mentioned, you mentioned like the politics involved in all this, and I guess my main question was like, particularly the context in London, and if you think about modernism, like I think about social housing, and I was just curious as to like why you thought that so many of these dictators were so like enamored with kind of commissioning modernist housing. Oh, not housing, sorry, modernist.
In this case, they were not housing, but it was really the idea. Imagine that it's in a way how to export an image of a country in construction that wants to the idea of a progress and avant-garde, if you can say. Image of this power. Of course, they were. It was a tool. It was a strategy, and of course, they had talents there that really could materialize and after all these buildings, well, many of them, because it was a regime, really, and part of this thing is that if they want, as we call it, destrujización, if you want to undo this because of this image of representation of Trujillo's power. Come on, this is we've been using these buildings, and we're still using these buildings. We're not talking about taking out the logo of the regime. That of course this building had little things like Trujillo's 5-star logo, or of course the sculpted busts and all this stuff. We are talking about these buildings are being. This is the Senate right here, and so the buildings are useful, and of course many of them, they're not being respected as a important piece, and we are now working on the declaration of this site as a national heritage site, which is extremely difficult, but we are working on that, and constantly we are dealing with in order to make again people understand that this is something that we should preserve, and we are not giving a symbolism as celebrating a regime. I don't see it that way,
I want to check. One of the amazing things about the website is it is the impression that these buildings were all built in the 40s and 50s. Authoritarianism falls in the 60s, and then people just stop using them. But there's like the life of the 70s and 80s, which was particularly fascinating to me. They become the backdrops for soap operas. They become movie studios. They become where disco music is somehow Caribbean disco is invented. So there's a whole other side of the story that sort of begins
that was the
in
life.
the late 60s, 70s,
Exactly.
80s,
So,
90s.
and we're still talking about they are really useful. They are useful, but we have to look at this conversation as heritage in a critical way. We have to be. I know we cannot preserve everything, but if it has value and it has been done by someone who really assume a position of a very good architecture being done, we should definitely fight for maintaining this architecture. And this is a very difficult and complicated conversation to have there with people that they simply don't have any sensibility whatsoever. I think there was somebody here and here.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, what an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I wanted to know, there's such a long history of vernacular architecture in the Caribbean, in the Dominican Republic, for the climate that it's in. Obviously, the Caribbean is very hot, you have all these hurricanes, you have heavy sort of thunderstorms where the rain comes in sideways, for example. And there is such a rich sort of plethora of architecture, sort of louvers and overhangs and tragaluces, for example. I was wondering how well adapted were all these buildings for the sort of climatic environment they were in, because I know, for example, Hotel Jaragua, you said that it didn't have air conditioning. And then I know at the beginning, and I know like later that they installed these sort of overhangs for the sun. Yeah, so that was my question.
It's a good question because I would have to say, talking about the region, there are very good examples of very good adaptations. In some islands got very maybe more well done examples, very refined architecture. Some of them, in case of the Dominican Republic, you have very, very interesting of them. I am also so critical about some of them that they came up with a innovative glass facade that, of course, came a hurricane and really tear it apart. But I think that we still have a lot of lessons to come back and to try to see our own vernacular architecture and trying to do this exercise of vernacular architecture, modern architecture, what can we learn from it, and how these guys solve it, and how can we do it now, and how can we do it, and because we still have these challenges. And this conversation is very, very important and relevant because we are in the middle of the path where every year, as we speak, we are in alert of hurricanes and flooding and you name it, all these natural disasters, and we have to respond with, and these buildings are still there and they have been strong and they're still standing. Of course, we need to care and know how to intervene them, how to make them useful and in this century, let's say. Two more, and are we on time?
Yeah. We're good.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask, with this project of like restoration, where do you see responsibility lying for that restoration? Because from my perspective, a country like Haiti, partially that responsibility would be on maybe the French. Puerto Rico would obviously, like United States. Obviously, these countries have their own sovereignty, but for a national pride-esque sort of project like that, do you think it would be an international effort?
I think that this is great because we definitely need to see this as an international effort, like a collective through different, let's say, kind of collectively thinking how can we do this as a region, but definitely then in the reality is that every nation in the government should have their policies and should have the responsibility of managing heritage. Of course, in the case of Haiti, that is very, very fragile, politically unstable. The responsibility, I don't want to say France, but because it's very complex. But if in their system they need this, they need to have an organ that can rule and rebuild the whole society and country first. In their case, but in our other cases where we have, I mean, we also it's about a national policy as well, and I think that's we've been doing also trying to work hand in hand with authorities. That we once did a very beautiful project with my students, and we invited we went to we did short films. Nobody knew how to take a camera, and they had to do a short film, and we went to the cinema and we projected like the decay of all of these heritage building there. We call this a statu quo project, and we invited for a panelist to the authorities. Like and they were like shocked, but this is something. Of course, not shocked because they know. But the students were really facing the authorities. We have to do something about it, and this is something that I think that academia also is the academia, but also society could help to bring this conversation forward as a national topic among all of the problems and challenges we might have. There are a lot, of course, but let's go one by one, I guess.
Last question, maybe?
And now we'll have.
Okay. Hi, Alex. Thanks for coming. It's really a pleasure to hear you speaking again after so many years. Alex was my teacher. Yeah. So it's interesting to see Hotel Jaragua as the very first example of Dominican architecture that actually faces outward towards the sea, and that it's like free from this insularity. And I wonder, how do you see this still present today, this insularity? Like, do you see this in today's Dominican or Caribbean architecture in general?
I want to say that the insularity condition, I see it as the real challenge of our islands, not concerning only architecture, but also the relations between the islands. And as I said before, it's difficult that we get in touch, and it's incredible how alike we are as a region, and how even though our different pasts and presents politically, let's say, it's undescriptable. Like if you are from the Caribbean, even though you are from Trinidad and you have a different language, it's something in the DNA, because at the end, all of these people were all connected. The DNA, we are all somehow. So then we have the challenges. We have to face the problem of insularity, of being together and being separate at the same time, and somehow we have to break the glass on how are we going to do things in the future to make it change, and keep on building these bridges through initiatives, through academia, or and the governments themselves. They have to sit on the table, and I know that there's some efforts. There's some groups, CARICOM, but they're more interested in commercial relationships rather than, let's say, cultural. So, and of course, architecture will be then then inside a list of priorities. First, we're going to talk about business between the Caribbean. Later on, we'll talk about culture, maybe. But this challenge is real. It's important that we keep on talking about this, doing something.
Brilliant. I think on that note, I think you've thrown some seeds out in the audience, which will blossom soon. And I think we should break up for a kind of informal chat. But just before we do that, I think some thanks are in order. Firstly, to the Dominican Embassy in the UK for their support, especially to Her Excellency Ambassador Rosa Hernandez de Grullon. Thanks in particular to Ligia Reed Bonetti, who is the Cultural Affairs Attaché, for literally attaching us all together and for helping us have some wonderful rum that you can enjoy after to help facilitate the growing, and the ambassador. Dominican rum. To facilitate the seeds growing, I suppose. And then definitely with very much thanks indeed to Maria Amalia Leon, director of the Centro Leon, which is sponsoring this event and is the only reason this could happen, I suppose. So sincere thanks. And also to Carlos Lora Yunan, who is our resident Caribbean at the A through DRL, History and Critical Thinking, who is bringing the Caribbean back to the AA, and we're very delighted to have that. So we really look forward to continuing this project here, through our archives, through our School of Tropical Architecture, our historical links to the visiting school, to conservation and reuse. and we can't wait to be partners on this journey. But before we end, a quick word from our director.
I wanted to just add my thanks also to you, Nick, our chair of History and Theory. It's such a pleasure to bring the Dominican Republic and the Caribbean to the AA. It's the beginning of something really important. And I'm so glad also, Carlos, for making this possible and to bring the connection together. It's a subject so close to my heart, as you know. We could talk about this all night, but I think it's a wonderful start. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Alex. Thank all of you, and particularly Carlos. Thank you so much. I think rum is now on the table.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, Alex.